Musical Talk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast. Hello and welcome to another edition of Musical Talk. I'm Thos Ribbits. And as you know, I'm very excited about the return of Irving Berlin's marvellous show, Top Hat, to London over Christmas and the New Year. But I do hope it's going to feature the song The Fez I Love. Well, we've got a bit of a treat for you today because we're going to be talking about one of the great shows that you could have seen at this year's Edinburgh Festival Fringe and indeed elsewhere because it's been produced on a number of occasions and I'm sure it's going to go further because it's that good. And the show is called The Queen is Mad. It's a new musical by Amy Claire Tasker and Tom James McGrath. And when we saw it in Edinburgh this year, we thought it was a 5-star show. It's also been reviewed by many other people, and it's worth noting a quotation from the reviewers Adventures in Theatreland, who said it is by turns funny, heartbreaking, and rage-inducing. Now that's a really interesting thing to want to suggest that a musical will do. But of course musicals are just a branch of theatre. It's an artificial distinction to say that musicals are different from speech marks straight theatre, because anything that theatre can do, musical theatre can also do. And we wouldn't think twice if someone said this show in the West End or at the National Theatre or anywhere is rage-inducing. So why should we turn up our noses when a musical tries to do it? But in what way is it rage-inducing? Well, I think The Queen is Mad is an excellent example of a show which is making a point. It's unashamedly feminist in its stance as it imagines and reimagines the Spanish monarch Joanna the Mad, as she's known to history. But of course, when you see a name like that, you have to question, was she mad, or was she deemed to be mad for other political reasons? And this musical explores those, and as you can imagine, the oppression that comes from a patriarchy is very much part of what's being explored. But that's quite a dry way of describing what you actually get, because the show is passionate, but it's also funny, it's musically delightful, it's musically sophisticated, and overall it is simply an excellent 5-star show. But what's the show about? Well, here's the blurb from the Edinburgh Festival Fringe website. Joanna has always spoken her mind. When she unexpectedly becomes queen, her father and husband are determined to silence her. She went down in history as Joanna the Mad. But what if she wasn't insane, but furious? Six meets Sondheim in this dark saga inspired by Catherine of Aragon's older sister. Featuring Locked Away, Stiles and Drewe Best New Song Prize Finalist 2024, theatreandtonic.co.uk say that the show evokes a classic theatrical sound, lilting melodies which melt into dissonant, menacing lullabies. And perhaps more helpfully, under warnings, this will give you a sense of what the show was trying to tackle. It says contains distressing or potentially triggering themes, scenes of violence, coercive control, emotional abuse, psychiatric illness, and sudden loud noises. It was, in short, a terrific show, and I had the great pleasure of sitting down with the 3 people who made up the cast and the 2 people who made up the writers to discuss it in some detail. And so in just a minute, you're going to hear a conversation I had with Amy Claire Tasker and Tom James McGrath, and they are the writers, and also Maria Coyne, Robert Finlayson and Brian Raftery, who were the 3 actors who made this show absolutely come alive. It was a privilege to speak to all 5, and in just a minute you'll hear that conversation as we analyse what a marvellous piece The Queen is Mad actually is. But we also have a special treat in that we're going to be hearing 2 songs, including Locked Away, which was the Stiles and Drewe New Song Finalist in 2024. That's sung for you by Maria Coyne, and that's what you'll hear in just a minute. And then after the interview, you'll hear the song Disobedience, which features all of the cast, Robert Finlayson, Brian Raftery and Maria Coyne. So that's 2 songs, 5 creative people, a terrific interview, and a partridge in a pear tree. Or perhaps not. I think we're just a little bit too soon in the year for that yet. But it is a terrific show. Frankly, given the title of the show, you'd be mad to miss it. Let's hear that song Locked Away from The Queen is Mad.
All my life I've been told to be meek and shy, not to question why, not to lead but follow. Little girls should be quiet and wives should obey. And despite all the years being shoved aside, all the wounded pride I've been forced to swallow, I refuse to be silenced or do what you say. So it's no wonder that you think I should be locked away. Then you play with my mind, you pretend I'm mad, kill the love we had, contradict and scold me. Then you tell me to trust you and say that you care. Though I used to believe in your twisted lies, your adoring eyes, and all the dreams you sold me. Well, the spell has been broken, so Philip, beware. The tables are turning, try to lock me away if you dare. Now I see how you and my father have tried to control me so you can feel strong. Well, no more, I will not submit to the rules when the rules you've invented are wrong. If you thought that I was a problem before, that my obstinate ways were a crime, then I'll show you how vexing this woman can be. You've shut me up for the last time. There's a fire in my mind that has come alight, burning hot and bright. Now it's growing stronger. You will never contain it, try as you may. You will not hold me back. I will take my throne. I will stand alone. I will wait no longer. This will go down in history, a red letter day. From this moment onward, never again will I be locked away.
Hello, my name is Amy Claire Tasker. I'm co-writer and director of The Queen is Mad, a new musical at Edinburgh Fringe.
Hello, I'm Tom James McGrath. I'm also co-writer of The Queen is Mad and I'm musical director here.
I'm Robert Finalist and I'm playing King Ferdinand II.
What a wonderful thing to be able to say, by the way.
Exactly.
My name is Maria Coyne, although most people in the industry probably know me as Peach. I am playing Joanna in The Queen is Mad.
And I am Brian Raftery, and I'm playing Archduke Philip of Flanders.
Now, what we have here is the creative team and the performers, if I may say so. I feel very privileged today because actually between you are the people who have brought this excellent show to life. The Queen is Mad. Now, I think we should just briefly explain what the plot's about and who it's about. Amy, I'm looking at you here because I feel that as one of the creative writing side, that probably falls most comfortably to you, without spoilers.
Yes,
although
of course.
The carrot has been dead for many centuries, so
yes, you can find all the spoilers for the show on Wikipedia,
and any history book,
but don't. So The Queen is Mad takes the story of Catherine of Aragon's fiery older sister Joanna, who went down in history as Joanna the Mad because she would not be told what to do. And so we retell the story, the power struggle between her father and her husband for the throne of Spain in the early 1500s.
Now, what I'd like to do, because I think this is a terrific show, is probably start by talking about how it came to be in the writing and the music, if I may, and then, of course, how that gets put into stage and performance, how you inhabit those characters. But it's not a simple delineated conversation, so do feel free to jump in with each other. How did the idea start?
Sure. So I was on holiday in Madrid 2 years ago, and I was in the Prado Art Museum, and I saw a painting of a woman who was crying over the body of a dead man. And I thought, gosh, who is this woman and why is she crying? So I looked her up online, and it turned out to be Queen Joanna. And I saw she went down in history as Joanna the Mad. And my day job is I'm a psychiatrist in the NHS, and I wanted to write a musical about mental health with a theme. So I started researching Joanna to find out why she went down in history as Joanna the Mad. But the more I read about her, the more I thought, gosh, everything she's doing seems perfectly reasonable, given what she had to put up with. And so I brought the idea to Amy. Do you want to take it from there?
Sure, and I said, oh yeah, this is so current. This is Britney Spears and Bitches Be Crazy. This is absolutely, still going on. So we kind of took that angle on the story, and really it snowballed from there.
So the mental issue is a political one rather than one we would recognise as a medical one. Therefore, it's obviously a way of oppressing women, and in particular powerful women,
yes.
Which is a story throughout history, not least according to her sister, Catherine of Aragon, who was tossed aside by Henry VIII. By the way, I don't think I'd ever realised that Henry VIII's father-in-law was Ferdinand of Aragon. So even though I knew that obviously Catherine of Aragon's father must have been a king of Aragon, but I hadn't realised which one, because with greatest respect, Ferdinand of Aragon has not been handed down to history as one of the good guys on the whole.
No, although the Spanish consulate who came to watch us said he's one of our great heroes, so I'm not sure he was entirely happy with the portrayal.
But isn't that interesting? Because Henry VIII is thought of as a speech marks a great king, and yet he's also a great tyrant.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's interesting how history applies very different judgments, and even now we apply very different judgments to people who, if we met, I think we would find appalling. And I'd like to explore that in a minute with the performances and the characters that you're playing. But let's carry on with this writing. So obviously you were fired up, Amy, with the idea. So were you, Tom, with the idea musically, because you're the composer.
Yes.
So you saw a show in it, and suddenly the path became clear to you. But of course you do still have to make decisions with characters in history. Because they have a story. And also there are interpretations which may be had. So how did you sift what you needed to create a story between you? And also, how do you identify in a life that's already... So you're not inventing a plot, or rather you're building a plot around truth. As far as you want to take it from that central point. Where do you hang your songs and your nexus points of the plot and narrative?
Sure.
In a way that's speech marks sufficiently authentic to do justice, whilst at the same time being satisfying on stage. Sorry, long question.
Of course.
I do ramble, I'm so sorry.
Well, I think Amy and I both had, or something I did from the very beginning, was aware that the smaller the cast, the more possible it would be to put on the show for financial reasons. It's a portable show, yes. And we knew that if we had a cast of 10 or 15, it would be so much harder to, be able to stage a production. So we thought we really tried to pare the story down to who are the most fundamental characters of the story. And really the story wrote itself when you're reading biographies about Joanna. You really couldn't make up what her family did to her and how they treated each other. And because her mother passed away earlier on in her life, it really fell to Joanna and then the father and the husband as the three central characters in the story.
That also really essentializes the kind of Joanna versus the patriarchy, that core theme. Yes, yeah. Thank you.
Well, of course, can I say there's also, it's an interesting theme because I think there's a little bit of push me, pull you in the dynamic, certainly from my point of view as an observer. So you have a very clear story about Joanna being very badly treated over a very long time. And obviously her greatest period of dynamic action is in the first half of her life, I think would be the easiest way of describing that,
yes.
Given what happens.
Yes.
But in a spoiler-free environment.
Yes.
But that's true of actually almost every life. I saw a musical about Andrew Carnegie, and all the interesting things he did stopped in middle age because he'd made all his money and all the scandal stopped, and he just lived the life of a playboy and didn't really do anything terrible. So Act 2 was a little bit more of a slog. It was a very good show, but it is the problem with taking real life. actually. You know, people aren't necessarily interesting to the day they die. But the push me pull you element, and I find this very interesting, is that she sings a song about not being frightened of being disobedient. And indeed, I'm going to quote Elaine Page, which is not something I do that often. EP, I'm going to say defiance. You know, she's defiant she has defiance for, and she's disobedient towards the rules of the day, the direct rules of her father, the king. You know, she is pushing and kicking away at things. But she does ultimately become queen of Castile, and obviously politics takes place, which then deprives her from her position, principally because she's female and for the times relatively liberal. The word relatively is doing quite a lot of heavy lifting there, I think. But of course, to depose or to sideline a monarch requires disobedience. So you've actually got what sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander, so you've got this, here's a woman who's being treated very badly, and yet she's also being treated to a degree in the way that she has treated others. That makes a really interesting character dynamic for me, and I might want to explore that in a minute as well there. But is that something that you were playing with in the writing of it, narratively?
Interesting. Yeah, we see her as someone who never stops fighting.
Yes.
And when she does finally stop fighting, that there's no more story, that's the end of the show.
But can I say, she doesn't, even when she's not unable to actively practically fight, she rages.
Yes.
You know,
she
which is almost impotent, but yet at the same time speaks volumes.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's a meaningful rage rather than an impotent rage,
Absolutely.
even though politically it may not bear fruit.
Yeah, so to go back to some of the things that are swirling around in the last couple of questions, it's not 70 years and 70 minutes. It's very much, and somebody said that to us, and I was like, I'm not sure you were paying attention. It's very much, it starts, we have structured it as a story.
Yes,
and
you must, of course.
Of course you have to, if it's going to be a piece of theatre. It's not a biopic of like this happened, then this happened, then this happened. It's very much Joanna wants freedom, and her marriage to Philip is one way that she tries to get freedom, and then there are other ways that she tries to get freedom, including becoming queen, and then the show ends
in the way that it does.
In the way that it does, without any spoilers.
The songs.
Yes.
Now, it's got quite a lot of music, and you are sat at your keyboard throughout. Was that always the intention, to be a musically heavy narrative?
That kind of came from the way the show developed. We wrote it originally as a 30-piece production with the Irish Creative Collective in London. 30 minutes, sorry.
Yes,
sorry,
I was going to say, that's a very large orchestra you're offering up there.
So there actually wasn't, we still told the same story, but in 30 minutes, so there actually wasn't...
Oh, crikey, really?
Yes. So
that's a gallop, isn't it?
So there wasn't time to a full song, so we had to have basically a third or a half of each song, and so that was how the story was developed. And again, we didn't have time to actually end scenes and go on to the next scene. We had to just go straight from one thing to the next, which led to this kind of almost through lining underscoring going on. And so then we've gradually expanded the show from 30 minutes to an hour and 10 minutes now, but that has stayed, that we don't really see the show when we wrote it as having scene 1, scene 2, as opposed to it's one long piece. So that's where that came from.
It's a historic montage in that sense, and the music helps draw that. I mean, music does a wonderful thing, and you can make time move for you, so that you aren't doing 70 years in 70 minutes, but actually you can do 35 years in 2 minutes and concentrate. So
we might quote you on a poster for that.
You are very welcome. You, if you think I say anything worth listening to, then you're very welcome to use any of it. But the show is terrific. It's really interesting. But so, what was the musical style that you were aiming? Forgive me, because you can, particularly with people from history, you don't have to use music from that era, but you can also lose a show by picking something that's too wrong. I've been to a show about, I think it was set in the Edwardian era, and it had a hard rock score. And whilst there's nothing potentially wrong with that, it didn't gel. This was years ago, so no names, no background. But so it is important to find something that resonates and works to serve the narrative, actually.
Sure. Yes, I deliberately didn't try to write a Spanish-sounding musical. I didn't listen to Spanish music. I deliberately didn't try to make it sound Spanish. I wrote the music to suit my aesthetic and the kind of music I wanted to write at the time. My background
You can say no fairer than that.
Well, yes. My background is I'm a classical composer, and I've written pop music and Irish folk music, so maybe the music is a sort of combination of all those, and my, I love a lot of music theatre, particularly Stephen Sondheim, Stephen Schwartz.
You're speaking my language?
Stephen Flaherty, all the Stevens. Yes, and then I'm really into classical music. I would say so like Bartok and Stravinsky, the Impressionism, Debussy as well. And then pop music. I really love Max Martin and Steve Mac.
Another Steve.
All the Steves. It's a good name to have. Yes. So yeah, I would say the music is kind of I wanted to create a sound that didn't really sound like anything else, but I was really just pleasing I'm obviously aware of what the audience will. I'm trying to please myself, but also please everyone in the audience that we can. I don't want to do anything that will make anyone feel I don't understand that or I feel lost by that music. That there's always a very singable melody and anyone, regardless of their knowledge of music, can follow it. But also I want to write something that's very, for me, cerebrally satisfying and complex, so if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, you've got to write for your own satisfaction first, but make it accessible.
Yes, I want it to be very accessible.
And that's very clear, and very successfully done.
Thank you.
Actually, it sits very comfortably on the ear. It doesn't jar. It works with the narrative. It supports the narrative. It is the narrative. That's the nature of a good musical from my point of view.
Thank you.
I think from a performance point of view, Maria and I were saying just a couple of days ago, we were talking about it, and when you get the sides and the material to learn for the audition, so often you get material and you go, it's hard to learn, it doesn't flow, it doesn't make sense. And we both said how immediately this material was accessible, how it made sense, how the lyrics were really well written and thoughtful. The scenes were kind of logical and well set out. So it immediately had a kind of just a realization that it was, to us, a good piece of work and something one would want to be involved in.
It felt almost organically rising. I mean, that's really interesting from a performance point of view, because at the end of the day, you are the interpreter.
Yeah, you pick it up immediately.
Yeah. I think that's very interesting. Who does the lyrics, or is it a joint?
Sorry.
How did the lyrics come to be? Are they a joint?
They are a joint thing. We found a process that works really well for us, that Tom will write a draft lyric as he writes the music.
Well, before we do that, we always write the story. So for us, story is the most fundamental thing, and we'll map out what is the story of this song, what actually is going to happen in the lyrics.
Your A to B journey.
What's the journey? What are the sections?
Yeah, what is the title?
We'll always write the title first together.
Oh, do you go for title first?
Very title
That's
first.
interesting. And why that? What does that give you? How does that help you leverage the song?
In a previous iteration of my life, I was trying to break into the music industry, and I did a lot of Nashville-style songwriting, which is all very title-focused, and so I've taken that with me into music and theatre writing, where everything comes back to the title, and there are about 7 different song maps that every song in the world fundamentally follows, and we always use that as well. That every song in the show follows one of the 7 song maps, and all those maps are focused on the title, so it helps us both to keep a very clear idea of what the story is throughout the song.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because they also said there's only 7 plots.
Oh,
yeah.
There you go.
So, gosh, 7's the magic number in creativity, or if 3's not available, presumably.
I think as well, in this day and age, every new score that comes out is getting more contemporary, it's getting more screamy, it's getting more belty, it's getting more poppy. I think stories are being lost for the sake of format. High notes and TikTok sort of TikTok fan bases. And so for me, as a soprano, as a sector of singers who are slowly apparently dying out because we won't be screaming those notes for the TikTok audiences, it is a dream to sing something that sort of takes it back to a bit more of the classical side of musical theatre. And there's not a single song in the show where I would think, I don't really know why this is here, whereas I think it is quite common nowadays where a song has been put in for the sake of notes, and it doesn't need to be there, it doesn't advance the story, or it doesn't enhance the moment, where I just don't think there's any moments in this show where that's the case. I think every song carries the story along in a really necessary way, and it only elevates it. And
it's still true to the narrative and serves the narrative. Funny enough, I agree with you entirely on that. There's I saw a version of Guys and Dolls. It's in London at the moment, and it's terribly accomplished in its own way. It really is. And forgive me, I'm not in any way dissing it, but Sit Down, You're Rocking the Boat has become a song rather than a performance piece within the piece. So you could build up to it, and then Nicely Johnson sort of, well, the way I saw it, there was a sense of breaking character, and then the song was sung in a incredible way, although quite a slow tempo for that song. But it was a performance of a song rather than the actor-performer singing it to be true to the character. It was like, now I'm going to do a recital. And so there is a danger of that, and this show absolutely avoids that, and I agree with you, it's in that more traditional school, as far as I'm concerned, as well.
Like one of my favourite things about working, because I've worked with Tom and Amy for quite a few years actually on a number of different iterations of this show and other shows as well, but one of my, just with going on to the point of the songs and the point of the music itself, one of my favourite things about the two of them is that there's, like, every single note is there for a reason, every single key change is there for a reason. One of the songs that Philip sings, "I Care For You," the current way it is they changed something. It was all in a major key, and now there's a section that's in the minor, and it's one of my favourite little additions because it really kind of it's just this tiny little thing that really just kind of indicates what's actually happening in the psychology of the show, the psychology of the relationship.
It's evocative, really, and serves a narrative.
It's like it's suddenly like, instead of the whole song being in the major and it being a genuinely lovely song, it's now still a lovely song, obviously, but it's gone from there's one section which is now in the minor before going into the major. Then you really see kind of what's the whole plan. I'm trying so hard not to give anything away, but if Philip's intention of the song, just a sudden little shift from being in the minor key suddenly going to the major key, really just kind of it helps what Philip is trying to do, just with the psychology of the whole show again. It's very, very clever, very clever.
It can be very emotional, a small thing like that, can't it? It can move from tender to dynamic or firm, or it can go in the other direction from happy to, everyone's, minor is slightly more melancholic, if that sense,
or menacing. My minor stuff is slightly menacing and tricky to learn if you're learning by ear, which I did.
I've been very impressed these two guys learned
it all by ear.
I don't know how they did it. It's really,
really impressive. This entire show by ear.
Well, shall we talk about performance? We've been talking so much about the narrative, but the narrative has to be brought to life on stage for an audience in an accessible and workable way, and the three of you, it's a small cast, but it feels like a big show. And that, I think, is because you're filling the stage with your characters, and your characters are beautifully delineated, but never one note. That's what, these are real people. They're real people with very different motives, very different sensibilities, and of course you have to play from the context of the period as well. To be we were saying this at the beginning, to be a good monarch in the early 16th century requires very different skills to what we might expect from a leader of people in the 21st century. And it's sometimes hard to relate to that, but very few people consider themselves to be villains in their own lives. But we have amongst us one archduke and two monarchs. So, I feel in very exalted company. So, you're elevating a humble serf such as myself. I think we ought to start with Joanna as a character, but I would like to explore the kings and the archdukes who populate her life. She is the title character. She is the queen who is mad. You've got the narrative, you've got the songs. How do you find a real life character, or do you not go? Do you draw anything from the actual history, or do you draw everything from the narrative? And how then do you inform a life of 75 years?
I mean,
in performance. Yeah.
To be fair, just draw. I draw from the narrative and the piece that has been written.
You sort of got to, haven't you?
I think I can't go back to the 1500s and be like, hey, so how was this? So tell me your way. We don't even have. It's not like a historical figure where there's loads, even footage that you can look at and sort of relate to or draw from. But I think for me, whatever the piece, no matter what time period, no matter who you are playing, you can always just draw from truth. And I think what's probably pretty depressing is, I think, this started out maybe as a story about mental health, but really it's a story about misogyny, which is very much still the case in this day and age. It is not difficult for me to play an outspoken radical. That comes extremely naturally to me, I would say.
I think you made a terribly good point, if I can interrupt you briefly, how contemporary the piece feels.
Yes, absolutely.
We may be talking about kings and archdukes, but you can turn them into presidents, prime ministers and senior leaders.
But she was forward thinking of her time. I think it's brought up multiple times. She's trying to teach her servants how to read, how to be better educated. She wants, sort of more for everyone. She wants to talk about education. that was very forward thinking, especially for a woman of that time. So those kinds of things I find very easy to draw from, because it's not too dissimilar to myself. I've experienced plenty of misogyny, plenty of abuse from men in my life, so I have personal experiences that I can look back to and draw from. I'd like to think wherever she is and doing her a good service in retelling her story, but for me it's just pulling from the truth of what I can find out about her, and also from what I can in my own experiences. But I think the arc is really interesting because we don't start out as, the moody teenager and then it's like a slow descent into what it becomes. Yeah. There are moments of light, there are moments of happiness along the way, which maybe makes the whole thing even harder to digest, because you keep seeing these glimpses of hope and these glimpses of freedom, which is her whole ethos, is wanting that kind of freedom. So it's difficult when we rehearse and we go straight to an end scene, because for me I have to get there from the beginning really, and always follow that arc through to really reach where the show gets to. But it's just about committing to the truth of whatever period she's in her life in that moment. But
she also seems to be a character who's caught in her present and always looking to the future, because there is the possibility of hope and light, which, as you say, occasionally come to pass for her. She has moments, she has ups as well as downs, not as many as she deserves, but she has some. It's not one note, which must make it more interesting to play as well. But she's, we first see her and she is very much in the court of her father, King Ferdinand, and who rules with a rod of iron, essentially, even with his daughter. And there's a hint, isn't there, that torture has already been applied on one occasion.
Yes, there was a suggestion. Obviously, it's historical, so it's sort of hearsay, but a suggestion that, where I say, do you want to be put to the rack again? But her mother supposedly had her strung up with weights put on her feet, because she saw her as being sort of recalcitrant and needing to. So
and possibly
a form of torture, if it didn't happen. Everyone argues sort of. Nobody knows for sure, but that was a suggestion that happened to her.
Contextually, it seems pretty plausible, I suppose.
Plausible, absolutely.
So, that's where we first see her, and then later on in the court when she's married Philip, there's some happiness there, but there's also both Philip and Joanna are looking to the potential inheritance possibilities of, creating a dynasty and perhaps being able to take over the thrones of Aragon and Castile through dynastic succession. There's a sentence I wasn't expecting to have to grapple with this morning. Clearly, I'd have taken a run-up if I'd have known. And then, of course, later on, in the latter part of her life, time passes quicker than, that she's hoping and waiting for something to happen, whilst away from power. And it's episodic in that sense. It seems to... a fly stuck in amber kind of thing, almost, but desperate, still alive, but desperate to fly, but continually caught and moving from one capture to another capture with brief moments in between. That is it's a human tragedy, but it's also narratively helpful. But let's be honest, it comes in these episodes. But it's that seems to be quite a difficult character. Not a difficult character, but that's quite a spectrum that you've got to get across. That always, when the fly is trapped in the aspic, in Joanna's case, there's the hope of something. Yeah. Even when the quality of that hope, or the thing that's in prospect, gets smaller and smaller potentially.
Yeah, but I think even in this day and age, still as a woman, it constantly feels like that. So I don't think it's that difficult to draw from that feeling, because in a very different way, I'm not being locked up by my father as a kid, or I'm certainly not being taken to the rack or anything like that, but politically it's 2025, and as women we are starting to see rights that we fought really hard for start to be chipped away at and taken away from.
Erosion.
And I would say on a daily basis, I always joke that, as this is a show about female rage, that this is the only time I walked into an audition room and before I opened my mouth they were like, "You've got the job," because I feel like they could feel that from me, because I do feel that, as a female, and for all my other women out there, like I do feel that kind of rage on a daily basis, and that kind of bubbling of wanting justice for things that seem to be being chipped away at, and it's 2025. So I actually think that's one of the easier emotions to pull from, because even though we are centuries on and things might look different, they are still affecting us just in a different way.
Human nature sadly hasn't moved on or changed.
Right.
However, can I ask, rage and anger are quite difficult emotions to sustain in real life. So to find that, well...
Are they?
Well, in short bursts. Anger, maybe rage is different. I mean, the passionate element of that sense of the emotion.
Yes.
But also, therefore, I just wondered how that affects you in performance. You have to pull it from yourself, which you say is actually relatively easy to push.
Yeah.
You've got the experience, but actually being able to portray it sustainedly on stage strikes me as... I mean, obviously, all acting is actually incredibly tiring because, you know, I'm always amazed at what you're able to do. But do you find that more tiring than the other emotions? You know, she is a character who spends a lot of time angry.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself exhausted at the end of the performance? It's a very blunt question. I'm sorry, it's not very subtle, but how much does it take out of you?
I think obviously I'm not going to give away the end, but because of the way it actually ends, it pulls me out of that a little bit. I think no, not necessarily, because I'm, you know, still self-aware in those moments, but whatever has happened, you know, we get to that point in the story, and I sort of tend to remember at the same time every show that this is a true story and this is something that actually happened to someone, and that makes it very easy to, in my mind, escalate it to that place. Because
you have empathy with you.
I absolutely do, 100%. Yeah. It is an intense and tiring piece, I'm not going to lie, but I think... because of the way the show actually ends, I'm able to slightly come back from that a little bit. But it is definitely one of the more intense emotional pieces I have done in my career, for sure.
And use your soprano voice as part of that as well, because
singing
is a physically tiring. But it's physically tiring.
It is.
Because it's a techniqued job, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I'm very impressed. I mean, you know, I just sit here and watch. My job is much easier. I sit in an audience, but it always impresses me when I see it done very well.
The song that takes it to that place makes it easy to bring out as well. I think, you know, it's written well and in a good place that it's easy to place that anger and rage technically safely whilst emotionally intensely.
Yes, absolutely. Fine, yes. No one is hurt in the course of this performance. Shall we talk about Philip? If I may. Yes. Now, Philip is an interesting character, or so it seems to me, because he has a journey, and as any ruler of that period, they have to be relatively ruthless, but there's also a sense that he's a real person, or at least, you know, certainly his ambition and intent at the beginning is positive towards Joanna. I mean, you know, but it's serpentine, it goes up and down, and there are other considerations beyond his marriage to Joanna that really play on his mind.
I mean, one thing that I always kind of kept in the back of my head whenever I was working on the character was the fact that while he is an archduke, and yes, while he is of a person, even though he is an archduke of the Low Countries, he is also a kid basically. At the start of the show, he's not that much older than Joanna, and also didn't have a dad, if I remember.
Didn't have a mother.
Didn't have a mother. That was it. So he was all from the get-go an incredibly insecure person. So literally, it was kind of, for him, a lot of it was latching onto power and just kind of once obviously there's a song in the show called Control, and about having control and making sure we keep the person in question keeps control. It just seems to be an overarching theme in the show about even the villains. Yes. Kind of once how they kind of grapple with suddenly losing control, and just how that completely devastates them halfway through, because
an absolute match made in hell is an insecure man and a secure woman.
How lucky.
I thought it was... I don't know what you're on about. I thought it was a perfectly good relationship. Because literally just the journey he goes on, literally just from being this self-assured, very confident, terrible person, he then just would suddenly things start to change. He starts to lose control, and it kind of seems to be like rats fleeing a sinking ship kind of a point, halfway through the show, which I'm not going into because I realised, very close to giving something away. But his arc itself is an interesting, just trying to watch how he suddenly deals with just losing any semblance of power, literally, because he starts off being this very confident person, very happy with the relationship, with his marriage to Joanna, and there is a moment of genuine happiness between the two of them. And then once things stop going his way, there was two ways to deal with any given situation, and unfortunately Philip kind of went the wrong way.
There's a suggestion, isn't there, that he's not the cleverest person amongst the cast. Yes, quite. Yes, I mean, the two the king and the queen both, in this case, both seem much more intelligent. I'm sorry to say it.
Oh yeah.
No, you don't.
There are points where I'm just kind of where it's very much a case of just like Ferdinand and Joanna are just doing their scheming, and Philip is just kind of there staring into the middle distance in the background. And personally, I love that. It's actually a really fun part to play. Just one of my favourite notes that I've ever written, and I carry this with me to this day, is one of my favourite notes from a previous generation of The Queen is Mad is, in gigantic writing, be more dim. And I just carry that with me to this day.
I genuinely like that psychological thing, funny enough, about the insecurity of someone. I mean, it's not a very profound thing to say once again, but it's the insecurity means that he seeks validation, and he seeks validation. The problem is, once you've had one kind of validation, you then need to move on to the next validation. One validation is never going to be enough, and that seems to me what sort of propels Philip, because obviously marrying Joanna is a form of validation. You know, to marry someone from such an important family, and it does appear to be a love match at the beginning as well. So there's lots of benefits, but that cannot be enough in the longer term. So then Philip's focus moves on to the next thing, and therefore Joanna in a way is left behind, or becomes a mechanistic part of achieving that rather than a person in the works. So there's some interesting stuff going on there, I think.
Well, in the writing as well, we conceived it as Joanna becomes a threat to Philip's ego, and Philip is a narcissist, and when she becomes the heir and becomes more powerful than he is, that's a real threat to him, and he's not psychologically mature enough to cope with that, and that's why it turns from, spoiler alert, not this fairy tale of romance that it starts out as.
I think it's interesting that no matter, although it's Joanna's story, each character has their chance to unravel in whatever way that it is. I think for Ferdinand, it is the feeling of losing control. For Philip, it is his ego and insecurity, and for obviously Joanna, it is like her rage. But no matter what position anyone holds in the show, they all have a journey in which they unravel, which I think is interesting, because sometimes if the sole focus is on one character, it just becomes all about them and you don't actually care about the other characters too. But I think each character has a really strong arc and storyline and chance to have their spiral.
But it's nice triangulation as well, absolutely. You do see each character interconnect. I would like to talk about the king, King Ferdinand, because I think he's at the different end of the tree. He's already a monarch at the beginning. He's married his wife, the Queen of Castile, and they are joint monarchs over a much bigger empire, getting on for Spain by this stage, and certainly not a country to be ignored at this period. So you've got Philip, who has ambitions and is working his way up the power tree. You have Joanna, who doesn't actually have an expectation necessarily of becoming monarch, but has it, circumstance gives it to her. And you have King Ferdinand, who's secure at the beginning, who becomes less secure when his wife Isabella dies. So, but you also have the function of, please carry on.
So I launched myself into a series of really detailed podcasts, actually put together by a jazz singer, an American woman, and they were sort of an hour and a half each, and gave a really detailed historical overview of this period. Really? And Isabella and Ferdinand are seen as the sort of the unifiers of Spain,
the cornerstone of
what Spain became.
Yeah.
But he was actually the king of the lesser of the two kingdoms. Aragon was smaller and lesser of the two kingdoms, and their relationship was incredibly transactional. And she really wore the breeches, and she kind of acquiesced to him by every legal document was signed Ferdinand and Isabella, but in actual fact she ruled the roost, and I think he had an issue with that. He constantly felt that he was being undermined. She got involved in his military exploits, and oddly enough, she would do things like darn his socks. But when it came to sort of public pronouncements, you know, she was the one who was actually running the show. And I wondered whether that rankled with him. And in a way, looking at this, you saw that Joanna behaved in a very similar way to her mother. Her mother got away with it and is seen as, you know, the mother of modern Spain. Joanna got oppressed for it, and I wonder whether there was something in Ferdinand which he couldn't do that with Isabella, but he could do that with his daughter.
Yes.
You know, and whether there was a family history of possible mental illness. I mean, they were all inbred.
Yes.
But
it wouldn't be the only royal family with that problem.
No, but there was depression, a suggestion of bipolar. Who knows? You know, and maybe just these impossible environments that look. You know, you see that with modern.
We do.
Royal families, impossible kind of environments. So I wonder whether he takes out his kind of insecurity about his position with Isabella on his daughter and his
by proxy, as it were.
A proxy, yeah. That's what I thought about it.
And it is interesting, isn't it? Because it's odd, because he is clearly the villain of the piece, if we want to talk bluntly in melodramatic terms. But of course, he won't be the villain of his own story, because no one ever sees themselves that way. And also, at one level, particularly within the context of the period, however appalling we would find that now, you can sort of see why he does what he does, which makes it almost the worst. There's a kind of, at some sense, a logical thing going on. It's not cruelty necessarily for the sake of it. So there's also a delicious flavour in your performance, but there isn't it doesn't entirely unenjoy a touch of unpleasant behaviour.
Oh no, it's fun to do.
Yeah, thank you.
Lovely to do. Yeah. It's lovely to play a villain. Yeah.
But I think we should just briefly contrast that with, forgive me, you don't just play Philip and Ferdinand, you play court opinion. It was somehow you managed to conjure up court opinion and by extension, therefore, filtering out into the nation. You know,
that would be trial by social media now.
Yeah, or tabloid, isn't it? It's very much that, but it's done too cleverly. But with two people. Oh, can I say the most wonderful thing where you come on wearing jackets and then the jackets are turned inside out and become Spanish capes. That is a stroke of design genius, if I may say. And then you and there is something in the Spanish court, and I suspect it's because culturally in the United Kingdom, of course, our royal family became Protestant 400 years ago and some of the frills disappeared. There's an opulence, and the sleeves are very big in the Spanish fashion of this period, so just having these capes with sleeves, and you all look gorgeous in your wonderful costumes, but it's gaudy is the term, actually, funny enough, in terms of Spanish, isn't it? But gaudy, it's to our British eyes, it looks gaudy and over the top and peacockish. And you play those two characters with that kind of, well, I'm going to have to say it, may I? Camp. It is gossiping in a corner, isn't it? It's the old "have you heard?" and look, they haven't dusted. It's that kind of thing, all in one.
Clucking heads.
Yeah. They were written very much to be camp. That's a choice. You were very much allowed to see.
They enjoy that too much.
I think out of everything, those scenes were pretty much like tightened at 100%. Probably within the first couple of days. That part getting very easy.
Well, I also think that they needed to be that in order to make such a clear delineation from the other two characters.
Not being the two monarchs.
You needed that kind of clear difference and
the humour.
Yeah, feed camp funny. Hopefully, that's the reason.
Just going to contrast the awful things that poor Joanna is actually having to deal with. Just obviously because it is a very intense piece. It is quite a heavy piece. So we just kind of had to lean into the flamboyancy just to kind of lift the mood a bit.
If we put it in modern terms, this is someone posting an Instagram post of Meghan Markle
have you heard?
And everyone kicking off in the comments. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And this is it's still happening in its own way.
And then breeding
today.
other things, sometimes a very innocuous thing can turn into something in the telling, can't it, as well? And you see that, I hear the Queen isn't well becomes immediately she's gone mad as well in the public opinion of the day, such as it is. But also I think, forgive me, structurally it has a really interesting role as well, because it acts as punctuation in a story that could be almost unremittingly appalling. Well, it is unremittingly appalling, but it needs those moments to be able to draw breath, give the audience a change of tone, just briefly, but just enough. And I hate to say this, but I say this a lot, Brechtian dissonance. That there's a tonality which is slightly shattered, which allows us to then re-engage back into the piece, I think, afresh. I am being terribly poncy, I do apologise. But actually I think it works really well. I think it's got so many functions that it's one of the reasons I wanted to mention it. It isn't just two men swanning around the stage and almost choreography, choreographed gossip, I think would be the nicest way, in both in terms of the narrative, because of course it has been done deliberately to create an outcome, but also it looks fluid on stage. It does. I just wanted to mention that as a contrast.
Can I shout out our fabulous designer, Eve Mary Oakley, who has created these wonderful trick jackets that become capes, and
which people
all
want
the gorgeous
to be sold.
Oh yes,
it's the merch.
Yeah, it's where it's going.
Yes, absolutely. She's created a really fantastic visual world for the show, and it's such a challenge for Brian and Robert and a costume designer to say, okay, well, in this scene you're
21st
Philip
century.
and Ferdinand, and in this scene you're we go from 21st century to the courtiers to Philip and Ferdinand, and there's no time to change costumes. So it's one costume piece that does everything and the performances, and we absolutely buy it that now they're completely different people.
I couldn't agree more. Can I ask you then, as performers, how do you find the score? Bearing in mind the composers and
I think I've already said it in this conversation, but I love the score, and I also feel like it's been written for singers and not for audiences, and that's not to say audiences won't love it, but I just think, again, in today's climate of musical theatre, I don't think scores are being written that people can healthily sing 8 shows a week, and I think
really
this has been, it's written in places that are feasible for people to get to and be able to perform and not have to jump out of their character to be like, oh my god, this big note is coming up. It's really nice to be able to sing something and it continue to be story driven through every single song, and it not have that feeling of the big note is approaching, so I'm going to have to stop thinking about anything I'm actually doing character wise and just aim for that note and squeeze every muscle in my body and just hope to god it comes out. There isn't
Is that how you do it? I hadn't realised.
I actually don't think it is.
I know
but so I think that is, in today's musical theatre world, a real pleasure. Like, I haven't heard a score like this for a long time.
Can I just very briefly say, I just want to amplify something you said there, which I think is so profound, and that's such a really good observation. A song's written for performers first and not the audiences, because if the performers can do it, then the audiences will also get it and enjoy it. It doesn't have to be written directly for the audience. I think that's a very beautiful and wonderful distinction, and I should spend a lot more time thinking about that. So thank you. You've given me some nice food for thought for my train journey later.
And just the lyrics as well. I thought, wow, these lyrics really, I've done a lot of, I won't mention the names of very, very famous composers and lyricists, but wow, by comparison, the lyrics are intelligent, they carry the story, and I'm not just saying that because they're here, but I was learning the audition sides and the piece of music, and my partner, who's also in musical theatre, came and said, wow, that's really wonderful music, and sort of singing a refrain or a motif, and I thought
they caught in their mind that quickly.
I thought literally, and I walked out and went, they were singing a particular refrain, and I thought, that's the key. That's the key. You've got to have something that people take away, and that they're kind of intrigued by, and there's a lot of musical theatre now which just doesn't do that. In my view.
I know, I've heard quite a lot of it.
Yeah.
There are shows that I immediately walk out of, and if someone paid me £1 million, I couldn't sing you a line from it.
Myself, Tom and Amy know this very well, but I can be very critical on music, because I come from a classical piano background
tradition
were a massive part of. Like, I can't listen to something without analysing it annoyingly. So I tend to, like a similar vein to what Maria said about could I sing a single song? Like, no, I couldn't, because it all kind of sounded the same thing from the start of the show to the end of the show. So, but this piece is absolutely wonderful, just because of the fact that I literally listen to it, and it's something. It's a joy to sing. It's a joy to listen to, because I've actually got a meal in front of me. Just there's so much going on. There's just so much going on harmonically, and just I don't know how these guys, Maria and Robert, do, because I can't really learn something by ear. I need to have the sheet music in front of me. And
I mean, both seem amazing to me, by the way. I think everyone on this side of the table is doing magic.
Well, when I get the vocal lines, just sheet music with the vocal parts sent on to me, and I kind of was like, Tom, can I please get the piano part, because you've got a key signature there that might as well just be a suggestion, because it's such clever music. I'm looking at that and I went, that's not actually telling me anything. This is too clever.
And rhythmically, it's tricky.
But that's a challenge. I mean, that's obviously very difficult, but presumably it makes it rewarding, doesn't it?
Yeah. But I think it isn't dissimilar to learning music like Sondheim. It's never, you might listen to, and you're like, oh, that sounds like a beautiful piece of music, and like what goes into actually learning it is like, when there's one song in the show that when I think, probably until a few days ago, I was in my head like counting out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then I'm in.
Well, it is seamless if you did do that, if I may say. No, honestly, I mean, from my point of view, it's the triangulation of performance, but also the quality of the singing and the diction. Another thing that we've not touched on, but is not available in every show in Edinburgh this year. Being able to hear the words. I mean, it's such a fundamental, but to be able to perform in those characters in a song and get the emotion across. And the complex change of emotions, because it's also what I like about this is that these songs don't just say, I have an emotion and this is it from the beginning to the end of the song. It's whoa, it's all over the place. Because human life is like that.
Yes.
And also, if a song is doing what it so often ought to do, not always, but ought to do, which is carry the plot on, as there are narrative changes recorded in the song, people are going to respond to those in different ways. So of course there's going to be different emotional responses in the song, which requires actors to perform and to come across so that we, the audience, are getting that. And if you don't mind me saying, 100% got that completely. It's beautiful.
Tom and I have coined a term in our working relationship of action lyrics.
Action lyrics.
Action lyrics.
Jolly good. Explain more. Dynamically, please.
Yes, so that it's not just a song about being sad.
Yeah.
It's a song where there's actors can play an intention on every line. That there's something to do rather than just something to be. So action lyrics it is all about pushing the story forward.
There's no songs that are like Park and Bark.
No.
I'd never heard that phrase till this year, and suddenly it's coming to fruition.
Oh, yes.
But a friend of mine is starting to formulate, and I'm not sure if I yet buy into it, but he was saying he thinks that what we're talking about here, where the songs narratively carry things along within the lyrics of the song, within the melody of the song emotionally, is the American tradition. In general terms, the Broadway tradition, but there's what might be called a European tradition. Or he's starting to discern something. I haven't quite got it yet. Whereas you get the scene, which is whatever it does, what it does, and then there's a song at the end which amplifies the emotion that you've just seen, which seems a little redundant in some senses. No, I think we've all seen musicals exactly where you say, where there's a big and emotional bust up, and then one of the characters starts to sing a very sad song afterwards about how sad they're feeling, which is, if you like, just an amplifier. So it does exist. It certainly exists, in fact. Yeah. We've all seen it. But I prefer this method.
It's a harder thing to do, to write this kind of music.
Oh, yes.
And it harks back, although this is very fresh and modern, it harks back to the great classical musical theatre
tradition.
Yeah.
And the word is craft, I think.
Yeah.
Craft in the writing, craft in the songwriting, and craft in the performance. And that's, there's another word for this.
Musicals are rewritten. They're not written, they're rewritten.
And they ultimately abandoned but never finished. There was a meaningful comment, if I heard. You just went, oh. You had to go, subliminally coming out, I thought. Yes, I recognise that.
Yes, so we have done quite a lot of rewriting. And Brian's been with us from the beginning, from the 30-minute concert reading to last year we did a 50-minute work-in-progress production, and now we have the 70-minute show. And in each iteration, we reckon we're on draft 3.5 now. There was a 3.0 which none of the cast have seen because it was before we invented. Was it before we invented the courtiers? No, not quite.
We hadn't invented the funny courtier.
We hadn't found the humor.
A distinction.
Yeah, it was all a very heavy watch.
Yes, we hadn't found the humor, and we hadn't found the protest of rage. It was more of an impotent rage, and this.
Yes, dynamic rage is different, isn't it? It really is. It's an acting choice, but it's also a writing choice, and it is the right choice, I think, for this piece. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So while we're talking about the music, I'll just mention that the cast recording from last year's production is on Spotify and everywhere that music is streamed, and this Edinburgh Fringe cast is going to do an EP of the new songs that are in this year's show. So keep an eye out for that in the next few weeks. And
so completists can get both.
Yes. Completists will notice that the opening number of last year's show, musically, it's been replaced by the new song Disobedience that the courtiers sing, and that song has become Control, which is now Ferdinand's solo that begins the second half of the show. So you'll hear the same similar chords and melody and even some lyrics that got reused.
And can I ask, is that so? That's at the beginning. Is that because you're having to restructure it slightly for the Edinburgh slot, or is it actually a change that you wanted to make, having seen it in its previous versions?
It's we added about 20 minutes of material,
of course,
and that required some rejigging, and in particular, with a 50-minute show, an audience can tolerate the bleakness of the story without too much levity that balances it. With a 70-minute show, we've added these very camp courtiers to give us a boost when we need one, and so that has meant, and also we felt that the opening number last year was quite it was lyric heavy and not really character heavy, and it wasn't as clear as a way to begin the show.
It was more tell instead of show.
Indeed,
yes.
It was.
Show, don't tell.
But once again, I think this reflects on your professionalism to be able to spot that, because as you know, there will be people who say, right, I've done this. That's that. But actually, it's the point you were making earlier, I think, if I may say.
Yes, our friend Clive Hershorn, who's written books and was a critic, and written books about musical theatre. He always said that musicals aren't written; they're rewritten. And I think that's a good point.
Yes, I'm sure there's another rewrite in us after this. We'll see. We're getting such incredible feedback from audiences every day, like in the room, going, that could be clearer, or that's funny and we didn't expect it to be funny. This we thought was funny and nobody's laughing. Like there's loads of things. Not that that's really happening very much, but
but people laugh on different days, don't they?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So we will kill any darling in the writing process.
Yeah, nice quotation. But audiences do tell people everything. Can I ask? Forgive me then. Actually, that might be a very quick question. What do the audiences talk to you on both sides, if I may say, of the creative fence, if I can make that artificial distinction? But certainly in terms of the writing, from the narrative and songs, you said you're spotting things that just need to be finessed, perhaps. Anything fundamental? Or is it actually pretty much... the audience seemed to enjoy it when I came.
We're really proud and happy with this version of the show. And for a 70-minute, 3-actor version, I think if I say so myself, we've done well with this.
Yes.
I think there's...
I can back that up.
Thank you. There's potentially, we're thinking, what would it be like if we had a cast of 10 and we could have Isabella on stage, and we could have other, more courtiers, men and women courtiers. We've actually deliberately made some of the courtier characters that Robert and Brian play female characters, because otherwise it's always men versus Joanna, and that's not quite right. Like the rumours and the
are open to everyone.
Indeed, yes.
I think it's interesting because I think musical theatre is maybe some would think is the West End or something of that scale, but I feel a musical can be many different types of show in the way you can have very different kinds of films or very different kinds of novels. Not everything has to be a huge blockbuster, and I feel,
I agree.
Speaking personally, I feel this version of the show I think fundamentally works very well as a 3-actor chamber musical as such, but of course there could be a different iteration of the show that is the bigger scaled version. But yes, that's what I feel anyway.
Yeah.
But also that envelope is being pushed now with Operation Mincemeat and a few things like that, you know, and things are coming from Edinburgh. I mean, Six is obviously the most famous example.
Yes, of course, yes.
I mean, the secret to transfer appears to be people being willing to put money in rather than necessarily a formatting problem, which I think tells you everything you need to know what's good and bad about the West End in one sentence.
Yes, if anyone listening would like to put money in.
No, but it's a reasonable thing, isn't it? But I take on board your point absolutely, that because it's a chamber musical, and I think that's exactly the right term for this iteration, and it's marvellous in that form and format. That doesn't mean it couldn't go somewhere else and be tweaked or twiddled or kept as it is. I mean, I wouldn't do this version in the Palladium, I think, but you know, you have to play it. I mean, I'm hoping that's where you'll end up, by the way. But things are not necessarily quite as cut and dried as they were. I think there's a few breakthroughs which are just starting to herald, and maybe it's a new economic paradigm we're playing with that's actually making those kind of shows more palatable. You know, a cast of 5 is cheaper than a cast of 25, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's why we don't see Ivan Novello on the stage anymore with his 50-person cast, as much as I'd love to see one, I must say, but where would you find a stage big enough? How do the audience... What have you learned as the performers, the actors from the audience? I mean, in some senses, it seems to be so raw that, you know, you can feel and ride and surf the atmosphere in a room, it seems. But you've also got to be true to the text. Once again, what you do is, I think it's terrific and magic, I must say. But
I think the audiences have been quite different in terms of sometimes they are more on board with the humorous side of the show and also laugh at things that I don't know I would have expected, and sometimes they're more on side with the more tragic elements of the show. I've had quite a few women come up to me after and say they felt very angry for me,
and with you.
Yeah. I had a reviewer say they had a desire to rush and save me. So, do you know what? I might start acting more like Joanna in life, because then maybe that will happen rather than people being like, you're so fine, you're so strong, you're going to be fine, okay, bye. So I was like, I love that. I don't think anyone's ever had a desire to rush and save me before. So that was quite a lovely thing to hear.
That'd be quite a narrative change if a reviewer joins the story, though. Got to do some pretty quick improvisation there.
But yeah, so I think I've mostly had women feel like they are on board with Joanna and feel her pain, whether that relates to their own experiences or just the experience of seeing the show. Yeah.
Any Tin Pot tyrants come up to you and say, hooray for Ferdinand?
No, I'm not sure it attracts that kind of audience.
Quite right. Yeah.
But I think, you know, we've had very different responses, but the one thing that's been kind of consistent is that we've had absolute attentiveness.
And that's a real point.
And you can always sense as a performer whether people are laughing or whether they're kind of appalled at what's going on. You can tell when an audience remains with you, and you could hear a pin drop, and that's remained consistent throughout, so that's been nice.
That's a terribly good observation as well. It's the attentiveness and the engagement, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, that's your ultimate ambition, of course.
Yeah.
For me, it was just most of the reactions I get when I come out and people talk to me is just like, you know, well done, but I don't want to talk to you right now. It's you know, possibly the greatest compliment I think I've ever gotten was from the soundtrack, where someone said that they wanted to slap me through audio alone. So I went, well, that's great.
What a sentence! However, it's bringing out responses, all of you. I mean, that's amazing, isn't it? I mean, and that is an engagement. It's one of those pieces that you can. This is a sign of craft, it's a sign of professionalism, but a piece... I always think if I'm still thinking about a musical I've seen several days later, a week later, perhaps a month later, then that show's got something. Then you have to spend your time working out what it is if it's not obvious. This is obvious. But actually it's the carry-home shows which are the best shows. And, you know, I've seen a squillion shows in Edinburgh this year. It's what I come up here for. And I love it, and they're variable quality, but this is absolutely a take-home show for me. So as far as I'm concerned, you know, this is terrific. How can people find out about the show? How can people find out about you? What are your contacts, socials and web pages and things like that, if you want to give them?
Great. Well, the show Instagram is The Queen is Mad Musical. And on there, Robert's nodding because he's got to say that after the show every day.
I keep on saying The Queen is Mad, the musical, The Queen is Mad musical, I finally got it right, I think.
My favourite is your little look to Tom every day to make sure that you've got it right. So it is indeed The Queen is Mad musical on Instagram and Facebook. And we also have, on there you'll also find our link tree to everything. The other key website is www.pineconeperformance.com. And you can find on there links to the cast album, the production shots, and our contact details. If you'd like to come and produce it in the West End or just look at our production back, we can arrange that.
Name that one again, because that seems to be the portal that opens the doors.
Indeed, Pinecone Performance.
One word?
Yes, one word. Pineconeperformance.com.
Thank you very much indeed. And do you have a personal website for people finding you as a writer?
Yes, my name is Amy Claire Tasker. My Instagram is Amy Claire Tasker. My website is amyclairetasker.com.
There's a level of consistency here I'm finding very impressive.
So my name is Tom James McGrath. My Instagram is Tom James McGrath, and my website is tomjamesmcgrath.com.
Do you see what's happening on this side? Thank you.
My social media is closed to all but friends.
Oh, but you can be found online as an actor.
You're Asian.
He's incognito. My social media is @peachcoin because that's how most people know me in the industry. I do also have another Instagram. I think my podcast is mentioned in my bio for the show, but I also have a sex and relationships podcast, but I do talk about misogyny and female rage a lot on it. And so the Instagram for that is also Sex on the Peach Cast. So @peachcoin or Sex on the Peach Cast. There you go.
Very nearly a cocktail, but...
My name is Brian Raftery, and my Instagram handle is BRIANRAF and the number 3. So Brian Raff 3.
Thank you. So people can get in contact if they'd like to. But I think the best way is for people to come and see The Queen is Mad, either here in Edinburgh or wherever it goes next. I can only thank you. It is my great pleasure to spend time in the company of creative people. And this morning, I have had a wonderful time in your company, everybody. Thank you so much. You've all brought so much insight, entertainment, enjoyment, and creativity collectively to this conversation. So I can only thank you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Senor!
Oh, senor!
Have you heard the news?
What news? About the king?
No, my news is about Queen Isabella.
What? The queen? Please go on.
Well, she's leading a battalion down the coast. There's a revolt she must contain. Some little twerp won't toe the line. He'll be shown the wrath of Spain.
Ha ha! He's dead.
That's the result of disobedience.
That fool.
Well said. That's the result of disobedience. And now, good sir, what's your news about King Ferdinand?
Oh, so you haven't heard?
No, do tell.
His Holy Inquisition's quite the thing. Seems the new tribunal's going well. Heretics arrested day and night. Soon they all will burn in hell. But first, the stake.
That's the result of disobedience. They'll scream.
They'll bake.
That's the result of disobedience. Better to keep your head down low. Better to bow and fall in line.
Woe comes to men who resist their rightful master.
Better to make the king your friend.
Better to smile and drink his wine.
Take what you can and don't court disaster. Speaking of disaster, look who it is.
Ah, Princess Joanna.
I hear she hasn't been to confession in a month.
I heard she's been teaching her servants how to read.
Oh, well, no good will come of that. Good afternoon, Princess.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Or at least it was before they showed up.
How are the wedding preparations coming along? Is everything ready for tomorrow?
Ah, yes, big day for you and the Archduke, and a big night.
Everything is ready. This time tomorrow I shall be married and on my way to Flanders, far away from this tedious conversation.
Well.
Oops, I think I might have upset them. Castile is a land of narrow-minded fools who posture and preen and blindly follow rules. I see them stare. I know they detest my disobedience, but I don't care. That's why I protest with disobedience. Oh dear. Do watch your steps, senor.
I could say the same for you, your highness. A princess ought to smile and be polite. Frankly, she's a real disgrace.
Behaving like that with men of court, she should know her proper place.
Better she learn to hold her tongue.
Better stop acting like a child.
That cheek of hers,
She really should forget it. She ought to renounce her headstrong ways.
ought to be courteous and mild.
Or, mark my words, she'll live to regret it. She'll live to regret it. A princess ought to smile and be polite. Frankly, she's a real disgrace. Behaving like that with men of court. She should know her proper place. My dear, beware, a price must be paid for disobedience.
But they will see.
Take care.
I'm not afraid of disobedience.
A price must be paid for disobedience.
I'm not afraid of
Disobedience.
There we are, another song from The Queen is Mad. Disobedience, sung for you by Robert Finlayson, Brian Raftery and Maria Coyne. And of course I was talking to them and also Amy and Tom, the writers, about the wonderful show The Queen is Mad. 5 stars from Musical Talk. And I'd also like to say a big thank you to Katie Bennett, who was the producer and who set up the interview in the first place. And of course to Amy, who along with Katie arranged for those recordings to come to me. And they are the Edinburgh cast. And for me it was a delight to listen again to those songs which have been so effective dramatically on stage. Now you can find The Queen is Mad all over social media, particularly on Instagram, and Amy has her own website which also has details and videos from the production. That's Amy Claire Tasker, that's AMyClareTasker.com. The Queen is Mad is a show that I think will go on. It certainly deserves to, and if there's any chance of seeing it in the future, you should certainly think seriously about doing so. Well, that brings this episode of Musical Talk to an end, I think. Do join us again next week, or whenever, and we'll be talking about something completely different in the ever-expanding world of musical theatre. It may be December when this episode is broadcast, but we still have some surprises here on Musical Talk to take us up to the new year. I'm not going to say what they are, but I do hope you'll get a chance to enjoy them when they're broadcast. However, that's in the future. For the moment, this is Musical Talk. I've been Thos Ribbits. Pip pip. This episode of Musical Talk, edited and presented by Thos Ribbits. Copyright Musical Talk 2025, except for the songs, where the copyright remains with the creators. And my thanks go to Amy and Tom for allowing me to play their wonderful songs in this episode. To find out more about the world of Musical Talk and listen to past episodes, go along to our website www.musicaltalk.co.uk or subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your favourite podcasts. And follow us on all the usual social media networks.
The joys of recording in the zoo Southside Bar.
I think we have our first outtake.
That's fantastic.
A very different show, I think.
Yes, indeed.
That is clearly the end of the conversation. Are you all happy with that? Is there anything you wanted taken in or out? And I hope I didn't put anyone into any pressure or to give details and things, but it's always nice to showcase where one can.
Well done talking around the
respect that, how much you retained from seeing the one show. I was just like, oh my God, there's so many things you actually picked up.
Well, it's terribly
very, very well.
I have a very much empty brain on every other occasion, so I suspect it was just filling a gap. Nature abhors a vacuum, which is why I never clean the house.